Over the course of its 35 years in gaming, the Bond franchise has experienced the greatest of highs and the lowest of lows. But with 5 years having passed since the last release, you can't help but wonder, is there a future for 007 in video games? James Bond began his adventures in video games back in 1982 with the release of Shaken But Not Stirred, a text-based adventure released for the ZX Spectrum. This was the first of a number of Bond games released over the next decade that were never considered anything special. The franchise didn't achieve its first major success until the 1997 release of Goldeneye 007 for the Nintendo 64. Not only was this game a critical success, it also managed to sell over 8 million copies, making it the third best-selling Nintendo 64 game of all time, only coming in behind Super Mario 64 and Mario Kart 64. While the game was a movie tie-in, the developers were given as much time as they needed to allow the title to reach its full potential, and as a result, was amazingly released almost 2 years after the film. The game boasted a single-player campaign based around events from the movie, while also featuring a multiplayer mode that allowed up to 4 players to compete in a split-screen deathmatch style mode. Goldeneye has gone on to be considered as one of the greatest games of all time, and its multiplayer mode in particular holds an important place in gaming history. The next game in the Bond franchise, Tomorrow Never Dies, was released in 1999 for the PlayStation 1 and was the first Bond game to be published by Electronic Arts. This is significant as EA would go on to publish Bond games for the next 7 years. After mixed results with movie tie-in titles Tomorrow Never Dies and The World Is Not Enough, EA took a different direction for the rest of their Bond titles. In 2001, EA released Agent Under Fire, the first of their Bond games to feature an original storyline and lack the likeness of then Bond actor Pierce Brosnan. While the game not only featured the now standard first-person combat, it also added vehicle combat, which helped replicate the action from the films. Agent Under Fire went on to become the second highest selling game in the Bond series, so it's no surprise that EA continued down the original story road for the next 3 titles. Nightfire, Everything or Nothing and GoldenEye Rogue Agent all featured original stories not based on any Bond movie. While not based on any particular movie, Everything or Nothing went out of its way to attempt to replicate the style of the movies. With an all-star cast featuring Pierce Brosnan, Judi Dench, John Cleese and Willem Dafoe, and an original song written for the game's title sequence, Everything or Nothing was as close as a Bond game could get to transforming the films into video game form. EA's final Bond game took a different approach yet again, with the game being an adaptation of the 1963 film From Russia with Love, with classic Bond actor Sean Connery reprising the leading role. The game proved to be a breath of fresh air after so many games based on modern interpretations of the character. There was something special about playing through a 60s Bond adventure and driving around in classic Bond cars. If nothing else, From Russia with Love will always be one of the more unique games in the franchise, and is probably one of the best things to come from EA's time with the Bond license. After EA abandoned the Bond license in 2006, Activision acquired the rights. Their first release was a movie tie-in with Quantum of Solace, released in 2008. The game's story focused on not only Quantum of Solace, but also contained levels based on the previous film, Casino Royale, and as a result featured the likeness and voice of Daniel Craig, Judi Dench, and a number of other cast members from both films. Although receiving mixed reviews from critics, the game was successful enough to continue the franchise, as 2 years later Activision released GoldenEye 007, a Wii remake of the classic Nintendo 64 title with Daniel Craig in the starring role. The game was well received and in 2011 was ported to PS3 and Xbox 360 under the name GoldenEye 007 Reloaded. Also released in 2010 was Bloodstone. Released for PS3, 360 and PC, it was the first Activision title to feature an entirely original story and switch the perspective to third person. GoldenEye and Bloodstone were really the high points in Activision's history with the franchise. They went on to release one more game entitled 007 Legends, which attempted to recreate a number of scenarios from classic Bond films, once again with Daniel Craig in the lead role. Legends reviewed poorly with critics, and over the next year it was made clear that Activision were no longer involved with the Bond license. In the 4 years since Activision bowed out, there has been almost no developments made in the world of Bond gaming, but there has been one exciting rumour going around. In January 2014, president and co-founder of Telltale Games, Kevin Bruner, said, "I'm a giant James Bond fan, and I'm always frustrated by games that make him a mass murderer. He's a super spy, and that's a different skill set. The films make him less of a mass murderer, and there's not much killing in the books, more spying and intrigue." And to add further fuel to the rumour fire, a supposed leaked consumer survey from Telltale teased a potential Bond game entitled 007 Solstice. Nothing further has been revealed or heard about this potential title in the 6 or so months since this leak, so whether there was any truth behind it or if the title is even going ahead, we won't know for some time. The history of Bond games has been a rollercoaster ride, but there is serious potential in the IP. Whether it's Telltale taking up the task or another developer entirely, one thing is for sure: James Bond will return. Thanks for watching the video, guys. If you liked the video, give it a big thumbs up, comment, share it around with your friends, subscribe, and follow us at AUKS Social on Twitter.